If you are just starting bartending, this is literally everything you need to know about rum. What is up, everyone? It's your girl, Fly Girl Nina, and welcome back to Fly Girl Bartending. Today we're learning more in depth about rum, so let's jump right in. The first thing to know about rum is that it is super complicated. Out of all the spirits, I personally think that rum is the most complicated to understand for multiple reasons that we'll get into, but no worries because I'm here and I'm going to try my absolute best to help you understand the complexity of what rum is. First things first, what is rum? Rum is a distilled alcoholic spirit made from fermenting and distilling sugarcane byproducts such as molasses and sugarcane juices. And out of those two byproducts, molasses is more commonly used. About 90% of rum is made from molasses. What are the rules of rum? Now, as far as rules go, literally the only rule that makes rum rum is that it is made from sugarcane byproduct. Now, when we look at other spirits like whiskey, vodka, or tequila, they all have some sort of rules that define what they are and what they are not. But when it comes to rum, they're literally like,
as long as it has sugarcane or molasses in it, then it's rum. Anything goes.
In barrels, rum can be aged for however long or however short amount of time. Going off of that, if a rum producer wants to make it appear that the rum is aged or not aged, they are allowed to add in coloring or filter out the coloring in order to get that desired preference. Brands like Bacardi filter out the color in their product, and other brands like Black Seal Rum add in color to their product. Rum can be made anywhere in the world, and going off of that, rum producers can even take several different rums from several different countries and blend them together, and we can see this practice in brands like Plantaray. And because of that, if you see an age statement on a bottle of rum, it doesn't necessarily mean that the rum inside was aged for that long. Because again, rum producers can blend different rums together. So when it comes to rum, it's safe to assume that the age statement that you see on a bottle of rum is more like an average or an estimate of how long that rum has been aged for. Like literally anything goes when it comes to rum, there are no rules, which can also lead to a lot of variety in flavors and of styles of rum. Who created rum? Before rum, there were other spirits that involved sugarcane in the process. Batavia Rock is an Indonesian spirit that also has Chinese influence that is made from molasses and red rice. Because of the addition of red rice, Batavia Rock is kind of seen more as like a half sibling to rum. Another spirit that uses sugarcane is cachaça. Cachaça is specifically a Brazilian type of spirit that falls under the overall category of rum. Cachaça was made back in the 1500s and actually before like the traditional rum and what we think of rum today. Both Batavia Rock and cachaça I plan on touching in a future video, but for today we're just going to be focusing on our most commonly known traditional rum. There is a lot of history when it comes to rum and its worldly impact. For the sake of this video, I'm only going to focus on the Caribbean and the boom of sugar in that area. If I included all the history of rum, we would be here for a very, very, very long time. The most important thing that you need to know about rum is that it is directly tied to slavery, which you can't really say about a lot of other alcoholic spirits. So the boom of sugar happened in the 17th century during the European exploration era. And it's actually a horrible history of the Europeans stealing, killing, and destroying a bunch of already existing indigenous civilizations, especially in the Caribbean, North and South Americas, to take over their lands and resources. One of the most profitable goods during this exploration era was, you guessed it, sugar. So the Europeans brought with them millions of African slaves to work on their sugar plantations in order for the Europeans to make more money. Interestingly enough, sugarcane actually isn't even a native plant to the Caribbean, North and South Americas. The Europeans are actually the ones who brought sugarcane along with them to these new lands, and they actually found that the weather and soil in the Caribbean was far better for growing this crop versus growing the crop in their home countries. These Europeans included the British, French, Dutch, Spanish, and Portuguese. But in this video, we're really only going to focus on the British, Spanish, and French colonies. Some of the British colonies included Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago. Some of the French colonies included Haiti, Martinique, Guadeloupe, some of the Spanish colonies included, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Dominican Republic, and more. Okay,
Pause.
so before we get any further talking about the history of rum, we really need to talk about the process and production of sugar because it'll give a little bit more background context. Sugar production is actually quite extensive and difficult to harvest. There are a lot of steps that need to happen for sugar to be processed. In short, sugarcane gets chopped down and quickly transported to the mill to get washed and pressed so that the sugarcane juice is extracted from the stalk. The sugarcane juice is then filtered and poured into a large vat. Before sugar gets turned into crystals, the sugarcane juice goes through a series of chemical reactions and processes, and the liquid gets spun around in a machine that separates molasses from granulated sugar. I linked another YouTube video in the description that talks more about the process on how sugar is made. So if you want a more in-depth knowledge of how sugar is produced, you can go ahead and check out that video. Also, keep in mind that that video shows the process of sugar and how it's made in today's standard. So it has a lot more advanced technology versus back in the 1600s when sugar was first being produced. So I definitely suggest, as you're watching, try and think back to a time when we didn't have that technology and how difficult sugar must be to be made. Okay, so coming back to the history of rum. During the time of the sugar boom, molasses was seen more like waste or trash. There was no need or use for molasses, so they would just store it in barrels and set them out in the sun. Now, with the hot and tropical climate of the Caribbean, it actually caused the molasses to naturally ferment. And like said before, there were a lot of sugar plantations spread throughout the Caribbean. So, interestingly enough, because of this, the creation of rum was pretty much birthed in all these different colonies in the islands, but all around the same time in history. So there's not actually one birthplace of rum, but rather many different birthplaces of rum, which again is very unlike other spirits like tequila, whiskey, or gin. And because rum was essentially created in several different colonies spread throughout the Caribbean, it does leave a blur of exactly how the fermented molasses ended up becoming a distilled spirit. But what we can assume is that the transformation happened differently in every colony. And I also want to point out that it was most likely the African slaves that discovered the fermented molasses and started drinking it because, again, it was there, free. The slave owners basically viewed it as trash. They weren't going to use it for anything because they were mostly focused on making sugar. But what we do know is that the first industrialization or sales of rum happened on the island of Barbados. So that is where we're going to end the history section about rum today, because again, we could go down a ton of different rabbit holes, but I'm trying to steer this video to be more bartending related. A more in-depth history will be for another time. But it's super important that we know that slavery was a huge factor as to why we have rum today. There is quite literally blood on the hands of how rum was created. And I personally am not going to sugarcoat anything about the situation and ignore that these events did in fact take place. And with that being said, I'm leaving some video links in the description from other YouTube history channels, specifically about the topic of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade that was involved in the creation of making rum. Now, I ain't your mama, so you don't have to watch the videos, but I really think that it would be good for us overall as a human population to watch some videos about slavery. And remember that it's not cool, okay? How is rum produced? Each island or colony in the Caribbean has their own traditional way on how they make rum, but overall these are the general steps that they are most likely following. Rum producers can use either sugarcane juices or molasses and put them in a fermentation tank with water and yeast to ferment for up to a couple of days. Then they take that fermented beverage and distill it either in a pot or column still, or even a combination of the stills. Then the spirit is stored in barrels. Fun fact. Because of the hot tropical climate in the Caribbean, the aging process for rum is actually a lot faster than it would be for Irish whiskey or Scotch whiskey. And what this means is that the rum actually pulls a lot more flavor and characteristics from the rum barrels in a shorter amount of time. Back to the production. After the rum has been aged, then it gets diluted with water before bottling. What does rum taste like? The major factors that affect how rum tastes are two things: whether the rum is made from sugarcane juices or molasses, and whether the rum is distilled in a pot or column still. Molasses versus sugarcane juices. Molasses-based rums are going to have more caramel, vanilla, and sweet notes. Sugarcane juice-based rum is going to taste more vegetal, grassy, still a bit of sweet, but not as sweet as molasses. Pot still versus column still. Rums that are made in a pot still have a more bolder and robust flavor. It's going to be more in your face. Rums that are produced in a column still are going to have flavors that are lighter, cleaner, and more subtle. Again, rum has no rules, so rum producers can mix together a rum with any combination of all the factors that I just mentioned. Now, we can actually make assumptions on how the rum will taste based off of which country that the rum is made from, because each of the European countries have their own unique way of distilling spirits. So, referring back to the colonies, the English called rum rum. English colonies created more molasses-based rums, and they are also typically distilled in pot stills. So the flavor is going to taste more caramel or vanilla sweet, but in a more bold, rich, and full-bodied way. And specifically, Jamaican rum is made with molasses, only in a pot still, and uses a technique of adding dunder, which creates that signature Jamaican funk flavor. I'll touch more about that in a future video. The Spanish called rum ron. The Spanish also created molasses-based rum, however, they typically use column stills. So you still have those sweet caramel flavors, but it was more in a light, drier, and subtle way. Now, the French actually created their own category of rum called rum agricole. The French colonies created their rum with a sugarcane juice base. The taste of rum agricole is most comparable to chewing on fresh sugarcane. So the flavor of their rums are going to taste more grassy, vegetal, earthy, but still a little fruity. Rum agricole does tend to use column stills, however, there are some small producers that use pot stills too. How do we categorize rum? If you saw my video all about liquor basics, you definitely heard me categorize rum as white, gold, dark, and spiced. And yes, there are definitely bottles out there that are labeled in that exact same way, which would make it easy for us to assume that those are the categories of rum, right? And real quickly, let's talk about spiced rum. Basically, a rum that has added spices or has a spiced flavor. Do we know what spices are added? Not necessarily, only if the rum producers actually write on the bottle what spices they use in their spiced rum. Otherwise, we have no idea. But anyway, back to categorizing rum. However, based off of everything that we've learned in this video, rum has no rules, and looks can be very deceiving based on the color of the rum and the age that's listed on the bottle of the rum. So it's actually not easy at all to categorize rum. If you ask me, I think the best way to categorize rum is based off of what country it's made and whether it was made in a column or pot still. But unfortunately, not all bottles of rum state that information either. I also want to add, because I didn't mention it earlier, but there are also overproof or Navy strength rums similarly to gin. And those are typically used in a lot of tiki cocktails, especially if you want to set something on fire. So what does categorizing rum have anything to do with you being a bartender? Well, if you're making drinks for customers and one person wants a mojito, another person wants a dark and stormy, and a third person wants a Captain and Coke, you need to know as the bartender that all three of those rums are going to be completely different for each of those cocktails. And if you put the wrong rum in each of those cocktails, the flavors are going to taste really off. Honestly, the best way to truly get to know rum is by tasting a bunch of different types of rum, because it will help you actually apply everything that we learned today, and it will give you a more intimate relationship with it. I hope learning all this information about rum wasn't too overwhelming. Again, check out the links in the description for further knowledge. And if you want more in-depth knowledge about other spirits like tequila, gin, and whiskey, all of those videos will also be linked in the description box. And if you want to try out some fun rum cocktail recipes, make sure to check out my cocktail blog, bartending.com. Alright you guys, that's pretty much everything you need to know about rum. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time on Fly Girl Bartending. Stay fly!